Okay, so in this lecture, we are going to be going over things such as how to better organize your speech, how to find the right topic for you, because that's important. We're going to be looking at the information such as selecting a topic and a purpose, analyzing the audience that you're going to be delivering your speech to, gathering materials, and just supporting your ideas and your speech as a whole. And all these things are so important to the speech design process. Now, what I have here is what I call the stairway to speech success. So if you could kind of think of this as a flight of stairs. Now, the first step that we're going to take is that very bottom step, and that's going to be how to find the right topic for you. And we'll discuss how to do all these things in just a moment. The second step is going to be how to bring that topic into focus. And then the third step up is going to be finding material and support for the topic and the points that you'd like to make in your speech. We're going to also, on the fourth step, then work to design the speech. We're going to talk about the parts of a speech, how to design the different portions of a speech, and so forth. In the fifth step, we're going to talk about how to organize that speech, because organization is so vital to the speech process. Without organization, a lot of times your speech can seem unrehearsed, it can seem unprepared, it can make you appear less credible as a speaker, and just so many other things. And it can also, of course, affect the learning process of your audience, and that's something that we definitely want to work to try to avoid. We want to make learning as easy as possible for our listeners. Now, the sixth step here is going to be practicing your speech. Of course, practice is vital. Practice, practice, practice. I hate to sound cliche on that, but it's absolutely true. But we will talk about how to practice, what to do when you practice, and who you can practice with. And then the seventh step of the stairway to speech success is just do it. Just present the speech. You've gone this far. You've gone through the entire process. Now all you have to do now is just present the speech. Okay, so step one, find the right topic. When choosing a topic, you can start by looking at several different things. One of the things that I like to advise my students to do is choose a topic that you know a lot about already. Choose something that you're interested in. On your self-introduction speech, you didn't really have to think about that. Of course you knew about your topic. It was you. So that kind of came naturally, and that's why actually I choose to use the self-introduction speech as your very first speech. It allows us to get some grading feedback on our content as well as our delivery. A lot of times students do nervous tendencies and so forth that they're not aware of until someone notes it for them. For instance, you might have played with a ring or just fidgeted during your speech, and it's not something that you realized you were doing until I was able to point that out for you. So now in the future, when you go to play with that ring or you go to fidget, it's going to be something that kind of pops in your mind, and you're going to say, oh, I better not do that. So that's why we do that very first speech, and that's why I choose an easy topic, something you know a lot about, so you can focus on the delivery and portions of the content more than something that's heavy laden with research. So from here on out, though, we're going to be choosing topics that work for you. So choose a topic that you know a lot about. That's a great place to start. You also might want to look at choosing one that you want to just know more about. So let's say, for instance, you have a pretty good knowledge on a certain topic. For example, the process of adoption, or perhaps how to cook a certain dish, anything like that. You can look at that and say, okay, I know a lot about this because I've experienced it, or it's something that I've researched a lot, or whatever that is, but perhaps you just want to learn even more about it. And then if you're just drawing a blank either way on those things and you're going, okay, there's nothing that I can really think of, well, another great way to choose a topic is just to sit down and brainstorm that topic. And brainstorming is a method of generating ideas for speech topics by free associations of words and ideas. You can check that out in your textbook, but a few different ways that you can brainstorm is just using clustering method, where you just kind of come up with general ideas for a speech and then just start to kind of throw out random ideas for what that might be. For instance, you might want to do a speech on your demonstration speech on cooking, but you don't know what you want to cook. Well, you might just write down a few different things. You might throw a few different things out there that you might consider demonstrating for that speech, and that might be a good way to start. Either way, though, those are great ways to think about choosing a topic. Now, also, though, you need to look at what am I most interested in? Now, why is that important? Well, because you want to choose a speech topic that's interesting to you. When you choose something that's of interest to you, you don't mind putting forth the legwork, so to speak, on that speech because you're already interested in the topic, so why not? For instance, I've heard several students in the past with the demonstration speech that have an interest in mechanics. Well, perhaps you want to show us how to change the oil in a car or how to check tire pressure or something like that. The basics of mechanics on a car. That might be a little broad, but you see where I'm going with that. If you're interested in it, that might be a good place to start. Of course, I've had students in the past that enjoy cooking. On a demonstration speech, cooking something, demonstrating it to us would be a great thing to do as far as meeting the requirements of the speech goes. You also want to look at what do you hope to accomplish? Well, in this course, I give you the general purposes of these speeches. The first one was to introduce yourself. The next speech is going to be a speech demonstration. You'll have an informative speech and a persuasion speech, and then you'll have a student choice where you can choose either to complete an informative or a persuasive speech again. So you need to look at what you hope to accomplish. Do you know enough to speak on this topic? Never choose a topic that you know absolutely nothing about because you're starting at square one. I mean, you just don't have enough knowledge to speak on that topic responsibly. And we'll talk about responsible knowledge at a later time. You also want to look at things such as, can I make this topic interesting and useful to my listeners? If you don't feel that you can, perhaps you need to move on to a different topic. Of course, we always want to strive to choose topics that are useful and relevant to our listeners as well. You wouldn't want to demonstrate how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to your listeners because that's pretty self-explanatory. So you want to choose something that's interesting and useful. I recently, for a demonstration speech, had a student show me how to make um, traditional, I believe it was, I'm trying to think of which culture it was now. I'm drawing a blank. Either way, they showed me how to make their traditional egg rolls that their family recipe has passed down. That was very interesting to me because I didn't know the difference between the types of egg rolls between different cultures and different styles of cooking. So I thought that was really interesting and useful. It doesn't have to all revolve around cooking though. I guess I'm just thinking of that because you guys have demonstration speeches coming up soon, but try to choose topics that are interesting and useful. For instance, in your persuasion speeches, you wouldn't want to do a speech on why people should attend college. Well, I guess in this class, since we're not doing face-to-face speeches, that might work. But let's say that you were delivering that speech in front of an audience of your classmates. Well, that wouldn't be a great speech topic because they're already enrolled in college, therefore they know the importance of college. So you want to choose something that's interesting and useful and relevant to your listeners. You also want to look at, can I share experiences with this or can I relate it to the real world? Being able to make a speech topic tangible and understandable to your listeners is very important and will help them to better understand and learn the material. Now, step two, you want to learn you want to work towards focusing your topic. So once you find something that you're interested in as far as a topic goes, make sure to examine it and see if that topic might be too broad or too short. For example, let's say that you had about 4 minutes to deliver a speech. Think about these topics for a minute. The topic of cancer. In an informative speech, the topic of cancer. Would that be too broad, too short, or just right? Well, that's going to be very much too broad, very too broad, because unfortunately, there's numerous different types of cancer. There's no way that you could cover all the different types of cancer in 4 minutes, much less actually elaborate on these things and really discuss the research behind this. So that's going to be too broad. However, let's say you were doing a demonstration speech on how to bake an amazing lemon pound cake. Well, that's going to be just right because by the time you go through the order, which by the way would follow a chronological order because we are showing a process here. So when you go through the process of how to make this amazing lemon pound cake, and of course you're going to include the introduction to the speech and the conclusion of the speech and show us how to make the cake itself and really go through the process and integrate research here and there of perhaps um, ingredients you could replace or things you could do differently, or why are you choosing certain ingredients over other ones, which is a great way to integrate research, by the way. By the time you go through this, you're going to find that 4 minutes is pretty good. It's just right to show how to make this amazing lemon pound cake while also following design that is, or proper design that's important for the speech process. Now, how to swing a golf club. Okay, I'm going to actually change that for just a second and make it into something that I'm more familiar with. My husband might kill me for that, but I am not someone that plays golf a lot, so I don't want to I don't want to get that email from a student going, okay, actually you could do that speech. I'm going to change that to how to swing a bat, how to swing a softball bat, let's say that. Now, if you were to do a 4-minute speech on that, would it be too broad, too short, or just right? Okay, let me explain myself first. I have actually had a college scholarship on softball, so I understand that there are many techniques on how to swing a bat, how to properly hit or swing the bat to hit the ball correctly to make that ball land in all different places on the field that you want it to. So I understand that you could stretch it to 4 minutes. However, is that something you want to do a speech on for 4 minutes? Is that something that your audience wants to listen to for 4 minutes? That's probably not going to work. So this would be a speech that's actually, as far as a topic goes, would probably be too short, too constricted. Two important principles to remember, though, as far as focusing your topic. You must have a clear idea of what you want to accomplish. You can't go into a speech without knowing that goal, having that goal in mind. And you're going to create those goals, and I'll talk about this in just a second, with your general purpose and your specific purpose, which is what I was actually leading into. You must work to determine what that general purpose and that specific purpose of the speech is, because that's going to help to keep you focused when you're creating the content of your speech. Now, a general purpose is the broad goal of your speech. In a broad way, what are you trying to accomplish? The specific purpose is a bit more focused, and it's a single and infinitive phrase that states precisely what a speaker hopes to accomplish in his or her speech. A good example here would be, let's say our topic is donating blood. Well, the general purpose of a speech that would be on donating blood would be to persuade, because you're going to be persuading people or advocating for something, and that's going to be why people should donate blood. Okay, so the general purpose is always to, and generally one other word, to persuade or to inform, or perhaps you're doing a wedding toast. It would be to celebrate. Now, wedding toasts are not something we would do in this class. That's a special occasion speech, but it might very well be something that you do in your personal life, so just something to keep in mind there. But in this class, our general purpose is usually going to be to demonstrate, to inform, or to persuade. That's pretty much what we're working with in this class. Now, the specific purpose is, again, it's a little bit more focused. So here, it would be perhaps to persuade my audience to help save a life and donate blood. So you see how the general purpose is kind of an umbrella of what we're doing, and the specific purpose is just a bit more focused. Now, things to think about when creating a specific purpose statement. You want to think about these things. Is my statement one single statement which contains one distinct idea? You don't want multiple ideas in there. For instance, you wouldn't want a specific purpose statement to say, to persuade my audience to save a life and donate blood, as well as become an organ donor. That's too much. It's everywhere. It's not something that we would want to do all in one speech. So is it one single statement that contains one distinct idea? You never want to phrase your specific purpose statement as a question. It's not a question. It's a statement. So it should be one single statement. You also want to look at, does it meet the assignment requirements? For each speech assignment you have in this course, you will have very specific assignment requirements. So make sure to always review those. The time changes on certain speeches. The requirements change. Some speeches will require you to have objects to manipulate in the speech. For instance, in your demonstration speech, you would not simply tell us how to cook something. You're going to show us how to do it. You wouldn't tell us how to change the oil in a car. You would show us how to do it. Now, you don't necessarily have to do every single step, if that's impossible. For instance, You might not want to crawl under the car in your speech, but you would definitely walk us through it and be there and show us what we would be doing. Also, you need to look at, can I accomplish this in the time allotted? Again, if you are telling us about a very intricate technical process in a demonstration speech, that might be something to reconsider because you might not have enough time to do that. You would really just want to take that time into consideration. As far as demonstration speeches go, just because that is your next speech you're completing, think in terms of how to. A demonstration speech is generally a speech that is a how-to speech. So how to, I'm trying to think of something that I haven't told you yet. How to, a few past speeches I've had, how to put together a baby crib, how to do a floral arrangement, how to properly perform basic exercises, how to create a well-balanced meal in 10 minutes or less, and you might want to show us a recipe on how to do that. So those are things that you can do. Anything pretty much you can put how to in front of, and it really focuses on one thing, one specific thing that you're doing as far as a process goes. That's going to be a great demonstration speech. You also want to look at, is the purpose relevant to my audience? Is the topic too trivial? Is it too technical? If it is, then you want to choose a different topic. So what is the difference, though, between a specific purpose statement and a central idea? I say that question because students get very confused with this a lot of times. A specific purpose statement is what you hope to accomplish. This is the most important early step in the process of developing a successful speech. Again, it's the most important early step in the process of developing a successful speech. Now, the central idea, or sometimes also called the thesis statement, is a little different. It's a concise statement of what you expect to say. Now, I want to give you an example here so that you really understand what I'm talking about. Let's say that your topic was on massage therapy and it's an informative speech. Your general purpose would be really simple, like I said, to inform. Your specific purpose is a little bit more focused, to inform my audience on the benefits of receiving regular massages. Obviously, that's what we're hoping to execute in our speech. Those two things really help us to keep us focused when we're designing that speech content, because if at any point in time we feel like we're veering off of that, perhaps we decide to start talking about all different kinds of things in our speech, we need to go back and go, okay, is the content I'm developing right now, is it informing my audience? More specifically, is it informing my audience on the benefits of receiving regular massages? And if it's not, then you need to think about perhaps chopping that extra material out because it doesn't fit with your speech. Now, you can see the difference here between the specific purpose and the central idea. Let me tell you what the central idea here might be. Massage therapy is often seen as a primary way, massage therapy is often seen as primarily a way to relieve stress, but its benefits also have deep connections to a person's overall health. So you see the specific purpose statement is showing us what we hope to accomplish, to inform my audience on the benefits of receiving regular massages. But the central idea is more of a concise statement of what we expect to say. Massage therapy is often seen as primarily a way to relieve stress, but its benefits also have deep connections to a person's overall health. So we can see the difference there. Things to keep in mind when we create a central idea, though. We want to look at, is it written as a complete sentence? Because that's important. It should be, a central idea should be written as a complete sentence. Is it phrased as a statement rather than a question? We always want to make sure it's a statement. No questions in either the specific purpose statement or the central idea, also known as a thesis statement. We want to look at, is it free of figurative language? Does it clearly encapsulate the main points to be discussed in the body of the speech? Because we want to make sure that when we create that thesis statement, that we are giving a clear idea of what we are going to accomplish in that speech. Can it be adequately discussed in the time allotted? Again, very important. Is it relevant to the audience? Do you think your listeners want to hear about about massage therapy and how it's not only a great stress relief, but also can help them with their personal overall health? I think they would. I think that's really interesting. We also want to look at, is it appropriate for a non-technical audience? And that's just because we want to avoid being overly technical with our audience. That can give them information overload, can confuse them, and just so many other different things. Step 3 would be to find material for your speech. So once you have a topic and a clear idea of what you want to accomplish, you need to begin gathering the material for support. Some great ways to incorporate support in your speech are to include narratives, which are basically just stories that illustrate the ideas of things you want to talk about in your speech. Narratives work great for attention getters in your introduction. I'll talk about that in a second. And also for memorable statements in your conclusion. Again, I'll talk about that in a second as well. Other things we can include for supporting material can be examples, either factual examples or hypothetical examples. These just help us to better illustrate our points, testimony, and facts and statistics as a whole. These are great ways to introduce research into your speech as well. Now, step 4 is just design your speech. You've probably heard this in writing classes as well and with written assignments, but just like in a written assignment, in a speech, you're going to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, often I can ask a student, what goes into a paper? What are the 3 portions of a paper? And they'll tell me introduction, body, conclusion. Well, the same is said for a speech. And that sounds good in theory, but I often ask my students right after that, well, how do you create an introduction, a body, and a conclusion? And most of them just stare at me blankly. They're not sure. They know the correct answer was introduction, body, and a conclusion, but they don't know how to go about creating those things. And if you've ever sat down with a piece of paper and a pen and thought to yourself, okay, I know what I want to do this speech on, but as far as where to start, I'm at a loss. Well, this next material is really going to help you out because that will help you to avoid that in the future. Now, I do want to point this out first, though. Although the body of the speech or the middle part of your speech seems like it might not be the first thing you would create, it is actually the first part of the speech you should create. I know it's in the middle, but we can't create our introduction and conclusion without knowing what's going to be in the body of that speech. And again, I'll go over speech design in just a second. That'll make a lot more sense. Do you want to number the amount of main points that you make in your speech? Listeners will remember your speech better if you limit the number of those main points. Most speeches should only contain about 2 to 5 main points. Again, most of those speeches should only contain 2 to 5 main points. Any more points than that, speakers are unable to remember all of that information. It's just too much. You want to also support each point with evidence, such as facts, examples, quotes, statistics. You also want to work to order your points effectively, and I encourage you in your textbook to check out the organizational patterns for speech design. Okay, now this is the part that I was telling you that we are going to go over. There are 3 parts to a speech: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And again, sounds good in theory, but how do you design them? Well, in the introduction, the very first thing you want to do is not introduce yourself. Please never start a speech with, "Hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about." That is something that is not something we need to know at the beginning of a speech. If you design the speech properly, you'll know what the speech is going to be about. So the very first thing that we want to hear in the speech process is an attention getter, also known as an attention grabber. So if you hear me use those terms interchangeably, it's the same thing. Now, with an attention getter, we want to grab the attention of the audience, and we can do this with a few different things: a story or a narrative, a quote, a fact, a statistic, or a question. Any of those things work really well for an attention getter. Now, after we grab the attention of the audience, we want to preview our main points. When we do that, we're giving the audience just a taste of what we're going to talk about in our speech. We're creating some interest and helping them to really lock into your speech and have a desire to listen. The body of your speech should be comprised of nothing but main points and your support for those main points. Main points and support for the main points. And again, don't forget in the body of your speech, You should have somewhere between 2 to 5 main points. That's it. And then after you do the body of the speech, you'll make it to the conclusion. In the conclusion, you're going to start by signifying the conclusion. A simple in conclusion or to conclude or something along those lines works quite well here. You're going to review or restate those main points that you covered. That's why we talked about today, whatever it is that you talked about. And then you're going to leave us with a memorable statement. A memorable statement is very similar to an attention getter, except for it comes at the end of your speech, and it's the last thing you say. Great attention getters can be stories or narratives, quotes, facts, statistics, and questions. And a good memorable statement, now this term also is called a clincher, so a clincher also works on that as well. This gives the audience psychological closure to your speech. So again, what part of the speech should we design first? Well, we have to design the body of the speech first, because without designing the body, we can't preview the main points in the introduction, and we can't restate our main points in the conclusion. Step 5, organize the speech. Outlining your speech, which is what we've started with in our first lesson, but outlining that speech just helps us to put our design on paper so that we can more clearly see how it's going to flow. Now, if you design your outline properly and really put the time and effort into it, you'll see your speech flow directly off of it. Now, this is important too. When you deliver your speech, you want to make sure that you use note cards. And I know a lot of times students come in this course and they think that note cards are a bad thing, and they think that it's the proper way to deliver the speech is to have a whole lot of problems there, so we don't want to do that. Also, so what we want to do is we want to use note cards, and we want to use a keyword outline. In our keyword outline, we're taking the outline that we created for our speech, we're breaking that down into very simple keywords that we're going to transfer onto our note card and help us when we deliver our speech. You want to avoid putting too much information in that keyword outline on your note cards, because what happens when we put too much information? We tend to read. And you should never, ever, ever read in your speech. It makes you sound robotic. It doesn't sound conversational. And pretty much you'll just lose the interest of your listeners. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Also, this has helped a lot of my students in the past, but it might be helpful to note nonverbal items on your note cards as well, such as pause here or stress this word or so forth. It's not necessary, but it does help a lot of my students. Step 6, practice your speech. You should sound like you are talking with your audience, not reading to them or reciting from memory. We want to make sure that we sound like we have a conversational tone. The best way to present your speech is to just speak naturally. Speak as if you were speaking to that person in a conversation outside of the classroom. Now, of course, you're going to speak a little bit louder than you probably would in that conversational environment, but you get where I'm going with that. We always want to use the extemporaneous method when we deliver our speeches. Extemporaneous method just means that we are using keywords and phrases to jog our memory on things, and we're never memorizing the content of the speech. And because we're using keywords and phrases on our note cards, each time we deliver the speech, the wording's going to change just a little bit, but the main points and the support are still there, and that's quite all right. You want to rehearse your speech, though, using focal variety. What does that mean? It means that you are using inflections of tone and pitch and so forth, just like you would in normal conversation. You want to show enthusiasm. Even when you rehearse your speech, you want to show some form of passion about the topic. And you always want to suggest confidence. And here's a little tip that I'm going to let you in on that a lot of my students sometimes don't realize until it's pointed out to them, but you can fake confidence. If you don't feel like a confident speaker, never tell us that you're nervous. Never apologize for anything in your speech. Just suggest confidence. And until we know otherwise, we're not going to think any different. We're going to think you're a positive, confident person up there speaking to us. But it's when you tell us that you're nervous that we start looking at it a little differently then. Okay? Never give up that credibility as a speaker. And then step 8, just step up and do it. You've already went this far with the speech design process. You're just going to step up and deliver the speech. So going back to planning an introduction, though, because like I said, there are 3 parts to a speech: an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In the introduction, the 4 major objectives of an introduction are: get the attention and interest of your audience. How do we do that? with a great attention getter. Don't forget attention getters can be stories, quotes, questions, facts, or statistics. Another major objective of an introduction is to reveal the topic of your speech. This is where you're going to, this is why you don't have to tell us, hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about. Because we're going to know what your topic is just by listening to your introduction. It's going to be in there. Next, you want to establish yourself as credible and establish that goodwill with the audience. And we do that by standing up and being credible and showing why we are a credible speaker and all of those different things. And then you're going to preview the body of the speech. So really what you need to do is, in an introduction, provide a great attention getter, establish your credibility, and preview the main points of the speech. Which is kind of what I've got on this slide as well. So how do we gain the attention of an audience? We can start off by asking a question. Rhetorical questions or participatory questions are fine. So what are these things? A rhetorical question is a question that listeners answer in their minds. So you might say, let's see here. Do you have a fear of needles? Are you someone that gets queasy at the sight of blood? Well, you might think that donating blood is not the right choice for you. But today I want to persuade you on why you should become a blood donor. That is a decent introduction right there. It's really simple. I asked you a rhetorical question. I asked you, do you have a fear of needles? Do you get queasy at the sight of blood? Well, those are questions that you don't expect someone to hold up their hand and go, why, yes, I do have a fear of needles. No, it's a rhetorical question, and it's a question that listeners answer in their minds. Now, a participatory question is a little bit different. These are questions that listeners can answer overtly, by a show of hands or verbally. So you might say, by a show of hands, how many people in here are registered voters? Okay, well, that's a great way to grab the attention of the audience. It's a participatory question. You said by a show of hands, and you gained their interest right off because they were interactive. So you can start a speech with that, of any of those questions, rhetorical question or participatory question. That makes a great attention getter. Another way to grab the attention of the audience, if you don't want to use a question, is you can begin with a quote. So let's say that you were giving a speech on the importance of higher education to an audience that was not enrolled in college, obviously. Then you might start with a great quote about education and how education is something that can never be taken away from you. That's a great way to start a speech, with a quote. You might want to start off with a narrative about something. For instance, here's a good one for you. I might start off by doing an introduction such as this. A while back, and this is actually a true story, a while back I was driving to my dad's house for a family get-together. My husband and I were driving up this very, driving in this very rural area, and I just passed a gas station, and my husband all of a sudden says, hey, when you get to pass another gas station, will you please stop? I need to get something to drink, and we need to get gas. And I said, well, sure, but I really wish you would have told me, because that's the only gas station for several miles. So I was going to keep going, because there was actually another one that was a few miles up that we could have definitely made it to. But for some reason, if this is not in my nature to normally do so, I just had this pulling feeling in my stomach to turn around and go back to that gas station. Now, if you knew me, you would know that generally when I'm driving somewhere, I don't like to stop very much, and I definitely don't like to turn around and backtrack. But for some reason that day, I just felt this pulling to do so. So I did. I pulled off in this parking lot, I turned around, and I went back to the gas station. My husband started pumping the gas in the car, and I got out just to talk to him for a second. And all of a sudden, I saw this car just fly into the gas station parking lot. They parked, and everybody jumped out. They grabbed this baby out of the back seat, and I just saw them just kind of shaking the baby, and I could tell that there was a panic there. And I was looking at the whole situation, and I was thinking to myself, something's wrong here. And finally, it hit me. I looked at my husband, and I said, oh my gosh, I think that baby's choking. And I said, well, they're not doing that right. They don't need to be shaking the baby or tapping the baby on its back. That's not the proper procedure. And my husband said, well, if you know what to do, then you need to get over there. And of course I thought to myself, well, you're right. Why am I not over there? So I took off running. over there, and I grabbed the baby and I started doing the infant Heimlich maneuver on the baby. And at that point in time, it's very sad to say that the baby was very unresponsive, and that's a terrible thing to ever see, especially in a small child. But the baby was unresponsive, and when I started doing the infant Heimlich maneuver on the child, I noticed that things started to improve, and she started to gain consciousness back a bit. And right at that point in time, just because I knew we didn't need to move her too much and stuff, I just instructed them to let me hold the baby. I could hear the ambulance in the background, and it seemed like just a few seconds later, the ambulance pulled into the parking lot. They grabbed the baby, everybody took off, and we're just me and my husband sitting in the parking lot. And he looks at me and he says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he kind of picked me up off the ground because at that point in time, the adrenaline had just knocked me on my my backside onto the parking lot. And he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go in and pay for the gas." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to get off the ground of this parking lot here." So I walked back to the car and I think to myself, had I not learned how to do the infant Heimlich maneuver, things might have went drastically different that day. And that's why today I want to talk about the proper way to do the or perform the infant Heimlich maneuver so you're never in a situation that you can't handle as well. Now, I know that was a bit lengthy, but that's a great way to use a narrative as a way to start your speech. And of course, when you use a narrative, you always want to make sure that it's a truthful narrative. In that case, it definitely was, but I grabbed your attention. Whether you realize it or not, I grabbed your attention. I drew you into that speech. I created an interest there, and then I previewed my main points, which would have led to the body of the speech after that. Another great thing to do is start off with a statistic or a strong fact. For instance, this is not true, but something along these lines. One in 5 children in the United States is diagnosed with autism a year, and that would be a strong statistic to start off with to really grab the attention of your audience before going into a speech about autism. Now, in the speech, you must give your audience a reason to listen, and that's why I said a story, a quote, a question, a fact, a statistic always works great as an attention getter. It gives them a reason to listen because it's interesting. You want to also establish your credibility. We can do that just by being given the appearance of confidence. You want to preview your main points. After you preview your main points, you're going to transition to the body of your speech. When you do the speech in the body, you're just going to give main points and support. For instance, on that speech on the infant Heimlich maneuver, I would talk perhaps a little bit about the history of the Heimlich maneuver, the infant Heimlich maneuver, how it was, discovered and so forth. And then I would show you how to properly do that procedure, the benefits of learning the basics of it, what to do, what not to do. And then I would probably conclude my speech. And in the conclusion, we want to signal the ending. A simple in conclusion or to conclude works well. We want to restate those main points. That's why today we talked about the history of the infant Heimlich maneuver. We talked about the proper way to perform the infant Heimlich maneuver and how to make sure you're never in a situation that you can't handle. And then we want to provide some psychological closure there. That's going to be that memorable statement, also known as a clincher. Now, good way to do that, again, stories, quotes, questions, facts, or statistics. I might decide to give you the remainder of the story. So I might say, in conclusion, that's why today we discussed the history of the infant Heimlich maneuver, how to properly perform the infant Heimlich maneuver, and how to make sure you're never in a situation you can't handle. And with that being said, I'd like to tell you the ending of this very powerful story. Well, at that point in time, my grandmother was on the city council of this very rural town. And I know that in most situations you can't find out information about a patient once they've been transported to a hospital or so forth. But my grandmother was in a position that she was able to ask the EMTs that responded to the call and ask to follow up with the child and see how the child was doing, because obviously I was very disturbed by the whole thing and I just wanted to make sure that the child made it. So I got a call from my grandmother, and she told me that the child was fine, that the EMT said that because of my skills at that point in time and being able to perform this procedure that I'd actually saved this child's life that day. And the child was then doing very well. She was released from the hospital and she had no long-term damage at all. So with that being said, that's why I encourage you to always learn how to do the basics of first aid, as well as specifically knowing how to do the infant Heimlich maneuver. Even if you have no children in your life at all, there will always be times in your life that you're around children. So it's very important to learn how to do this just in case. Now that is a conclusion for speech. It's just as simple as that. So just don't forget, in your introduction, you want an attention getter, preview your main points. The body is speech, you're going to do your main points and support. And in your conclusion, you're going to give us a signpost, a simple in conclusion, or to conclude is fine, something along those lines. Restate your main points and end with a memorable statement. Now, connecting your ideas. The ways that we connect our ideas is through connectives. And connectives are words or phrases or sentences that are used to lead from one idea to the next. These are things we're actually going to go over in a different lesson, but I did want to try to highlight them a bit here for you. A signpost is a connective word that is used that emphasizes something. For example, if you were to say, first you're going to do this, that's a signpost. First you need to do that. Most importantly, or my second point is, those are signposts that allow the listener to know where you're at in the speech. Transitions are a summary of where you've been and where you're going. So a transition is what leads us from one main point to the next in our speeches. A good example of a transition would be, before we look for solutions to this problem, let's see what other countries have tried to do about it. We transitioned to our next point with that statement. So why is organization so important? Well, according to your textbook, how well a speech is organized will likely influence how clearly the audience understands the speech, how the audience views the competence of the speaker, how confident the speaker feels about his or her delivery, or how clearly the audience understands the speech and views the competence of the speaker. So organization is vital in a properly designed speech. Just a few things to note there that you might see again. All right. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I will be posting a second lecture as well in lesson 2, and that should help you to better understand the material. But again, if you have any questions at all on the material, how to design your speeches, any of things as far as the discussion goes, you feel free to let me know. Just send me an email, and of course, I'm always here for you and happy to answer anything. Otherwise, keep up the hard work. You guys are doing great, and have a great lesson 2. Thank you.